The USS Horizon cut through the darkness of space, its engines humming with a gentle vibration that Captain Samuel Wright had grown used to over his 15 years in deep space. He stood on the bridge, hands clasped behind his back, watching. The stars streaked by on the main view screen. They were the first humans to venture this far into the Epsilon Eridani system, nearly 11 light-years from Earth. "Captain, I'm picking up an unusual signal," said Communications Officer Lisa Brown, her fingers dancing across her console. "It doesn't match any known human pattern." Samuel turned, his heart beating faster. "Put it through the analyzer." "Could be natural radiation?" Chief Science Officer Alan Cooper shook his head as he studied his readings. "No, sir, this is definitely artificial. The pattern repeats too perfectly to be natural." The bridge fell silent. Everyone knew what this meant. After decades of searching the stars, humanity might finally have found what they were looking for. "Send the first contact greeting package," Samuel ordered, his voice steady despite his excitement. "Standard protocol." Lisa nodded and transmitted the carefully designed message of peace that all deep space vessels carried. It contained basic mathematical sequences, images of humans, and simple greeting messages in multiple languages. They waited for 3/10 hours. Samuel paced the bridge, stopping occasionally to look at the strange green planet they were orbiting. Then Lisa's console lit up. "Captain, we're receiving a response." The view screen flickered and filled with an image that made everyone on the bridge gasp. The alien had a blue-gray skin that seemed to shimmer like silk. Its 4 eyes blinked independently of each other, and what looked like fine tentacles framed its face where hair would be on a human. "Greetings, travelers from Earth," the alien said in perfect English. "I am Ambassador Zextral of the Verdani Collective. We have been observing your approach for some time." Samuel stepped forward. "I am Captain Samuel Wright of the United Earth. Exploration Vessel Horizon, we come in peace and friendship." "As do we," Zextral replied. "Your species has been of great interest to us since we detected your radio signals nearly a century ago. We would be honored if you would visit our world." Within hours, plans were made for a small human delegation to shuttle down to the Verdani homeworld. Samuel selected Chief Diplomat Elizabeth Morgan to lead the team, along with Dr. Alan Cooper. For his scientific expertise and Dr. Olivia Martinez, their top cynobiologist. "Remember," Samuel told them as they prepared to board the shuttle, "you represent not just this ship, but all of humanity. This is the moment we've been preparing for since we first looked up at the stars." Elizabeth nodded, her blonde hair tied back in a neat bun. At 53, she had spent her entire career preparing for this moment. "We'll make Earth proud, Captain." The shuttle ride down to the planet was smooth. Through the windows, they saw vast cities of curved, organic-looking buildings that seemed to grow from the land itself. Flying vehicles moved in perfect patterns between the structures. They landed on a circular platform where a group of 7 Verdani waited. Zextral stepped forward, raising all 4 of its arms in what they hoped was a welcoming gesture. "Welcome to Vordania," the ambassador said. "Please follow me. Our council is eager to meet you." The humans were led through corridors made of a material that looked like glass but felt warm to the touch. The walls pulsed with soft light that changed colors as they walked. The council chamber was a large round room with 7 tall chairs arranged in a circle. The humans stood in the center, feeling the gaze of the Verdani council members upon them. "We have watched your species for many cycles," said the council leader, an older Verdani with pale blue skin. "Your development has been unusual. Most species discover unified field theory before they develop nuclear weapons. Your path has been different." Elizabeth smiled diplomatically. "Humans often take the road less traveled. We hope to learn from more advanced civilizations like yours." This seemed to please the council. They spent hours discussing culture, technology, and history. The Verdani were particularly interested in human art and music, concepts they found novel and exciting. Near the end of the meeting, Zextral brought up something unexpected. "We have recently terraformed a world in a nearby system. It is ready for colonization but has not yet been given a formal designation, The council leader leaned forward. As a gesture of friendship between our peoples, we would like to offer your species the honor of naming this world. Elizabeth was stunned. That's incredibly generous. We would be honored. The planet is quite beautiful, Zextral continued, touching a control panel. A hologram appeared in the center of the room, showing a world with vast oceans, green continents, and swirling white clouds. It has a breathable atmosphere, comfortable gravity, and abundant resources. It would make an excellent location for cultural exchange between our peoples. Dr. Martinez whispered to Elizabeth, "This is unprecedented." Naming rights to a planet are a significant honor in most spacefaring cultures. Elizabeth nodded and addressed the council. "We accept this honor with deep gratitude. I will consult with our government to select a name worthy of this beautiful world and our new friendship." "Excellent," the council leader said. "We will await your decision. Now, please join us for a meal. We have prepared foods that should be compatible with your biology." As they followed their host to the dining area, Dr. Cooper whispered, "Do they have any idea what they've just done?" "Humans are notoriously bad at naming things," Elizabeth smiled. "Let's hope the naming committee takes this seriously. The last thing we need is to offend our new friends with something inappropriate." What none of the humans knew then was that this simple gesture would lead to the first law of galactic diplomacy. And back on Earth, the wheels were already turning, as news of the alien contact spread across the planet. In a small office at the United Nations Space Administration, a bureaucrat named Gregory Nelson was about to be given the task of organizing the committee that would choose the planet's name. Neither the humans nor the Verdani could have predicted what would happen next, or how a simple name would change interstellar relations forever. Gregory Nelson sat at his desk in the United Nations Space Administration building, staring at the official assignment on his screen. As head of the newly formed Planetary Naming Committee, he had been given what seemed like a simple task: choose a dignified name for the Vordani's offered planet. He pushed his glasses up and sighed. "This should be straightforward," he said to himself. "We'll gather a small team of experts, review some options, and select something appropriate." His office door opened, and his assistant, Megan Phillips, walked in carrying a tablet. She was young, only 26, with short red hair and a constant smile that Gregory found both refreshing and sometimes annoying. "Sir, have you seen the news?" she asked, turning her tablet to show him. Gregory squinted at the screen. The headline read, "Aliens give humans naming rights to planet. What would you call it?" "Oh no," Gregory groaned. "How did the press get this already?" "We were supposed to keep it quiet until we had a formal process in place," Megan shrugged. "Apparently, someone on the diplomatic team leaked it. And now it's trending worldwide. People are already suggesting names online." Gregory stood up quickly. "This could be a disaster. We need to get ahead of this before it turns into a circus." But it was already too late. By the next morning, social media was flooded with planet name suggestions. Television shows were running special segments asking viewers to call in with ideas. Schools were holding contests for students to submit names. 3 days later, Gregory called an emergency meeting with the other committee members in the UNSA conference room. 5 people sat around the table, all looking as worried as he felt. "We have a problem," Gregory said, displaying a chart on the wall screen. "The public interest in this naming opportunity has exploded beyond anything we expected." Dr. Lavera Wilson, a respected astronomer, raised her hand. "Why don't we just ignore the public suggestions and proceed with our original plan? We have a list of dignified options based on ancient Earth mythology." Professor Jack Murphy, a cultural anthropologist, shook his head. "I'm afraid it's too late for that. The Secretary General has already announced that this will be a global collaborative effort to strengthen public support for the space program." "Exactly," Gregory said. "And the legal team informs me that since the announcement was made officially, we are now bound to include public input in our decision." Megan, who had been quietly taking notes in the corner, spoke up. "Maybe we could create a 2-step process? Let the public suggest names, but the final decision stays with this committee?" Gregory nodded thoughtfully. That might work. We could set up an official submission website, let people vote on their favorites, and then this committee selects from the top 10 most popular options. The group agreed, and within days, the official planet naming portal was launched. The rules were simple. Names must be in good taste, cannot be offensive, and should reflect the spirit of human-Verdani friendship for the next 3 weeks. Submissions poured in from around the world. Some were thoughtful and poetic. Harmony, New Dawn, Concordia. Others were more creative. Blue Jewel, Starlight Haven, Equaterra. But as the voting period neared its end, Megan noticed something strange happening with the results. She knocked on Gregory's door one morning, looking concerned. "Sir, we might have a situation with the voting." Gregory looked up from his desk. "What kind of situation?" "Well, remember that British research vessel a few years ago that the public named Bodie McBoatface?" Gregory's face fell. "Please don't. Tell me ... Megan turned her tablet around to show him the current voting standings. At the top of the list with over 30 million votes was Planety McPlanetface. Gregory stared at the screen in horror. "This can't be happening. What are the next highest options?" Megan scrolled down. In second place with 12 million votes is New York. Third is Earth 2 Electric Boogaloo with 8 million, and fourth is Simply Bob with 6 million votes. Gregory put his head in his hands. The Verdani are a dignified, advanced civilization. We can't present them with Planety McPlanetface as our choice. They'll think we're mocking them. But that the voting was legally binding, Megan reminded him. The Secretary General made that very clear in the public announcement. Gregory spent the next 2 days in meetings with UNSA lawyers, trying to find a way out of the situation. But the legal team was firm. The public voting process had been established as official policy, and changing the rules now would cause a diplomatic incident of its own. 1 week later, the Planetary Naming Committee gathered for their final meeting. The mood was grim as Gregory stood to address them. "Despite our best efforts, we are legally bound to present the winning name to the Verdani," he said. "Planety McPlanetface will be our official submission." Professor Murphy laughed nervously. "Perhaps the Verdani have a sense of humor." Dr. Wilson looked doubtful. "From what we know of their culture, they value dignity and formality. This could seriously damage our new relationship." "We have no choice," Gregory said. "Ambassador Morgan, we'll present the name to the Verdani Council tomorrow. All we can do is prepare her as best we can to explain our ... unique cultural approach to naming things." That evening, Gregory called Elizabeth Morgan, who was still on the Verdani homeworld. The video connection was slightly delayed due to the distance. "Please tell me you're joking," Elizabeth said when he told her the news. "I wish I was," Gregory replied. "But it's official. The name won by a landslide, and we're legally bound to submit it." Elizabeth closed her eyes for a moment. "The Verdani have been so welcoming, so dignified. And now I have to tell them we're naming their beautiful planet Planety McPlanetface?" "Try to explain it as a cultural phenomenon," Gregory suggested. "Frame it as a demonstration of human creativity and our democratic process." "I'll do my best," Elizabeth said, not looking convinced after the call ended. Gregory sat at his desk long into the night, wondering how something so simple had gone so wrong. Tomorrow, the fate of humanity's first interstellar friendship would depend on how well an alien species could understand Earth's strange sense of humor. And somewhere, in millions of homes across Earth, people went to sleep chuckling about their new friend in space, a pristine, beautiful world soon to be officially known as Planety McPlanetface. Elizabeth Morgan stood before the mirror in her guest quarters on the Verdani homeworld. She straightened her blue diplomatic uniform and practiced her smile, which felt more like a grimace. Today was the day she would present the official name for the new planet to the Verdani Council. The name Planety McPlanetface felt heavy on her tongue, like a bad joke she was forced to tell at a funeral. "You can do this," she told herself. "Just explain Earth culture. They're scientists. They'll understand." A soft chime at her door indicated her Verdani guide had arrived. Elizabeth took a deep breath and opened the door. Zextral stood there, its 4 eyes blinking in what Elizabeth had learned was a sign of pleasant greeting. "Good morning, Ambassador Morgan," Zextral said. "The Council is assembled and eager to hear your planet designation." "Thank you, Zextral. I'm ready." As they walked through the curved hallways toward the Council chamber, Elizabeth tried to organize her thoughts. Dr. Alan Cooper and Dr. Olivia Martinez joined them along the way, both looking as nervous as she felt. "Any advice?" Elizabeth whispered to her colleagues. Alan shrugged. "Maybe they'll think it's charming." Olivia looked less optimistic. "Just be honest. Explain our weird human ways." The doors to the council chamber slid open silently. The 7 members of the Verdani High Council sat in their curved chairs arranged in a perfect circle. The room fell quiet as Elizabeth and her team entered. "Welcome, friends from Earth," the council leader said, its voice soft but carrying clearly through the room. "Today marks a historic moment in our people's friendship. We are honored that you have chosen a name for the world we offer as a symbol of cooperation between our species." Elizabeth stepped forward, her heart pounding. "Honorable Council, on behalf of Earth and humanity, I thank you for this privilege. Our planetary naming process involved millions of our citizens in a global democratic vote." The council members leaned forward slightly, a sign of interest. "After careful consideration and following our cultural traditions," Elizabeth continued, "we have selected the name—" She paused, forcing herself to maintain her diplomatic composure. "Planety McPlanetface." Silence filled the room. The council members looked at each other, their head tentacles twitching in what Elizabeth recognized as confusion. The translator devices on their collars blinked rapidly as if struggling to make sense of the words. "I do not understand," the council leader finally said. "There must be an error in translation. Could you repeat the designation?" "Planety McPlanetface," Elizabeth said again, her cheeks growing warm. "It's a combination of the word planet with a common human naming pattern that emerged in our recent history." One of the council members leaned toward another and whispered something. The universal translators couldn't catch it, but Elizabeth could. See the confusion spreading among them. Zextral stepped forward. "Ambassador Morgan, this name does not translate meaningfully in our language. Does it have a significant meaning in yours? Perhaps referring to one of your deities or historical figures?" Elizabeth glanced at Alan and Olivia, who both gave her encouraging nods. It was time for the full truth. "Respected Council, I must provide some cultural context," Elizabeth began. "Humans have a complex relationship with formal naming processes. Several years ago, our Science Institute asked the public to name a research vessel. The public overwhelmingly voted for Bodie McBoatface, a playful, somewhat silly name that was never expected to win." She pulled out her tablet and displayed images of news headlines about the Bodie McBoatface incident, along with other examples of unexpected public naming choices throughout human history. This became a cultural phenomenon on Earth. When faced with naming opportunities, humans often suggest lighthearted, unexpected options. It's a form of humor that has become tradition. The council members studied the examples, their confusion still evident. Then, unexpectedly, one of them made a sound. Elizabeth's translator took a moment to process it, then identified it as laughter, a concept the Verdani rarely expressed. "You mean to say," the laughing council member said, "that your species deliberately chose a name that has no serious meaning purely for the purpose of amusement?" Elizabeth nodded cautiously. "Yes, while many serious names were suggested, our democratic process selected this one. I understand if you find it inappropriate." "We can certainly select an alternative." The council leader raised a hand to stop her. "No need, Ambassador. We asked your species to name the planet according to your customs." "This is apparently your custom?" The council members began speaking rapidly among themselves in their native language, too quick for the translators to keep up. After several minutes, they turned their attention back to the humans. "Ambassador Morgan," the council leader said, "we have studied human culture extensively since first detecting your radio signals. We understood your art, your music, your literature, But this concept of humor, especially as applied to formal naming, is fascinating to us. Elizabeth blinked in surprise. You're not offended? Offended? No. Intrigued? Yes. The council leaders. Head tentacles rippled in what Elizabeth now recognized as excitement. This reveals an aspect of human psychology we had not fully grasped. Your species finds joy in the unexpected, in breaking patterns of formality. Zextrol moved closer to Elizabeth. I believe I understand. The name itself becomes valuable precisely because it is not what one would expect. It creates a shared experience of surprise that bonds your people together. That's actually a very insightful analysis, Alan said, looking impressed. The council leader rose from its chair and approached Elizabeth. The planet shall be officially designated as Planety McPlanetface in all galactic records. Furthermore, we would like to establish a cultural exchange program to better understand this human concept of humor. Relief washed over Elizabeth like a cool wave. We would be honored to participate in such an exchange. As the meeting concluded, Elizabeth and her team were escorted back to their quarters. They could hardly believe how well the Verdani had taken the news. That went better than expected, Olivia said once they were alone. Alan nodded. Much better. Though I can't help wondering how other alien species might react to our naming conventions. Elizabeth smiled for the first time that day. Let's hope they're all as understanding as the Verdani. What none of them knew was that news of the planet's name was already spreading through subspace communications to other alien civilizations. And not all of them would be as accepting as the Verdani. In fact, in a distant sector of space, a council of elder species was already beginning to draft what would soon become the first formal law of galactic diplomacy. 5 years had passed since the naming of Planety McPlanetface. Humanity had expanded its presence in space, establishing diplomatic relations with over a dozen alien civilizations. The USS Endeavour, a diplomatic vessel under the command of Captain Frank Harris, drifted in orbit around a gas giant in the Proxima Centauri system. The ship's mission was to meet with representatives of the Zorlak Federation, a species of tall, insect-like beings known for their precise mathematical minds and rigid social structures. Frank stood by the large viewport in his ready room, watching the swirling clouds of the massive planet below. His dark hair was starting to show hints of gray at the temples, a sign of the stress that came with his position. A chime at his door pulled him from his thoughts. Come in, he called. Lieutenant Diane Russell entered, carrying a datapad. As the ship's cultural attaché, she was responsible for preparing the captain for all diplomatic encounters. Her short blonde hair framed a face that was currently looking concerned. Captain, I've been reviewing our briefing materials for the Zorlak meeting, and I've noticed something strange, she said. Frank turned from the viewport. What is it, Lieutenant? Well, sir, the Zorlak specifically requested that we not bring any naming specialist to the meeting. In fact, they've added a clause to the diplomatic protocol stating that humans will have no input on designations for any celestial bodies, outposts, or ships in their territory. Frank raised an eyebrow. That's oddly specific. Any idea why? Diane nodded. I think so, sir. I've been tracking mentions of Earth in interstellar communications. There's been a recurring theme. She handed him the datapad. Look at these translated messages from 6 different species. Frank scrolled through the screen, his frown deepening as he read, Ensure humans are not consulted on naming the new space station. The Council agrees no human naming conventions will be adopted for the star mapping project. If the Earth delegation attends the moon colony ceremony, make it clear they have no naming authority. Frank looked up. This can't be a coincidence. No, sir. I believe it's directly related to Planety McPlanetface, Diane said. The story has spread faster than our actual diplomatic efforts. It seems to have become something of a cautionary tale among alien civilizations. Frank set down the datapad and ran a hand through his hair. So you're telling me that because of one silly name, aliens across the galaxy are now afraid to let us name anything? It appears so, sir. In fact, Diane hesitated. I found evidence that some species have actually codified it. The Galter Union has what translates to Galactic Law Number 1, never let a human name your planet. In their diplomatic manuals, Frank couldn't help but laugh. Galactic Law Number 1? As in, the very first law they thought to create when dealing with humans? Yes, sir. Before trade agreements, before weapons treaties, before anything else, they decided the most important rule was to keep humans away from naming rights. Frank shook his head in disbelief. How has this affected our other diplomatic missions? Diane consulted her notes. It's created some awkward moments, but mostly it's become a humorous icebreaker. Many species find it amusing once they understand human humor. The Verdani have actually embraced it fully. The Verdani? How so? Planety McPlanetface has become quite successful, sir. What started as a joke has turned into one of the most popular tourist destinations in the sector. Frank looked surprised. You're kidding, not at all. Human colonists began settling there 3 years ago under Governor Patricia Duncan. They've fully embraced the planet's silly name and built a culture around it. Their main spaceport is called Porty McPortface, the capital city is City McCityface, and so on. Tourists from a dozen worlds visit just to experience what they call human humor immersion. Frank laughed again. So our diplomatic embarrassment has turned into a cultural success story? It seems that way, sir. The Verdani Embassy reports that tourism revenue has quadrupled in the last year alone. Several other species have even started experimenting with humorous names for their own less formal projects. A beep from the ship's communication system interrupted their conversation. Captain, came the voice of Communications Officer Steve. Rogers, we're receiving a transmission from the Zorluk delegation. They're ready to begin the meeting. Thank you, Ensign. Tell them we'll be right there, Frank replied. He turned to Diane. Well, Lieutenant, let's go meet with the Zorlaks. And remember, no suggesting names for anything. Understood, sir. Diane said with a smile. The meeting with the Zorluk representatives took place in the ship's conference room. 3 tall green-shelled beings stood stiffly around the table, their compound eyes reflecting the room's lights in a rainbow of colors. Their translator devices hummed softly as they spoke. Greetings, Captain Harris, said the lead delegate, its antennae twitching slightly. We welcome this opportunity for diplomatic exchange between our peoples. The honor is ours, Frank replied, with a respectful nod. We look forward to establishing friendly relations with the Zorluk Federation. The meeting proceeded smoothly as they discussed trade possibilities and cultural exchange programs. But when Frank mentioned the possibility of a joint research station in the system, the Zorlaks grew noticeably tense. We will, of course, handle all designation protocols for any shared facilities, the lead delegate said quickly. Frank caught Diane's eye, and she gave him a subtle nod. He decided to address the issue directly. I understand your species may have concerns about human naming conventions, he said. I assure you we respect your cultural preferences in this matter. The Zorlaks seemed to relax slightly. We have studied the case of the planet designated as Planety McPlanetface, the delegate said, the translator struggling slightly with the name. While we recognize this as a valid cultural expression for humans, the Zorluk Federation prefers names that reflect mathematical precision and logical categorization. We completely understand, Frank said diplomatically. Rest assured, all naming rights remain with your people. As they left the meeting, Diane whispered to Frank, that went well. They were practically mandible deep in anxiety until you mentioned naming rights. Frank nodded. It seems our reputation precedes us across the galaxy. I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Maybe a bit of both, sir, Diane replied. But it's certainly making our diplomatic missions more interesting. As the USS Endeavour prepared to leave orbit, Frank couldn't help but wonder what other effects Earth's peculiar sense of humor might have on galactic politics. Little did he know that in just a few years, humanity would be hosting the first ever Galactic Cooperative Summit, where Galactic Law Number 1 would become a much more official matter. 10 years after the naming of Planety McPlanetface, Earth prepared to host the first Galactic Cooperative Summit. The Grand United Nations building in New York had been expanded with a new wing designed specifically for alien delegates. Representatives from 27 spacefaring civilizations were scheduled to attend, making it the largest gathering of different species in known galactic history. Grand Chancellor Kevin Monroe stood at the window of his office, looking out at the garden where workers were placing the final touches on the welcome area. At 62, Kevin had gray hair and kind eyes that crinkled when he smiled. As Earth's highest diplomatic official, the success of this summit rested largely on his shoulders. His assistant, a young man named Paul Lewis, entered the room with a data tablet. "Sir, the final agenda for the summit has been approved by all attending delegations," he said. Handing over the device, Kevin scrolled through the list of topics: interstellar trade agreements, shared scientific research protocols, cultural exchange programs, and more. But one item near the end caught his eye. "Paul, what's this about formalization of unofficial galactic law number 1? He asked. Paul shifted uncomfortably. "Ah, yes. That was a late addition requested by 15 different delegations. They were quite insistent about it. But what is Galactic Law Number 1? This is the first official meeting of galactic civilizations. We haven't established any laws yet." Paul cleared his throat. "Well, sir, it seems that an unofficial rule has been circulating among alien civilizations for some time now. They refer to it as never let a human name your planet." Kevin stared at his assistant. "You're joking." "I'm afraid not, sir. Apparently, the story of Planety McPlanetface has become something of a legend throughout explored space. Most species find it amusing, but they've also taken it quite seriously as a practical diplomatic guideline." Kevin sat down heavily in his chair. "So, at our first major interstellar summit, where we're trying to establish humanity as a serious member of the galactic community, one of the official agenda items is essentially a joke about our naming habits?" "Yes, sir. Though the alien delegates don't seem to see it as undermining human authority. Several have described it as an endearing quirk of our species." Kevin rubbed his temples. "Have Ambassador Morgan join me for lunch. She was there when this all started. Maybe she can help me figure out how to handle it." Later that day, Elizabeth Morgan sat across from Kevin in the private dining room. Her hair had more silver in it now, and her face showed the lines of a decade spent in high-pressure diplomatic work. She smiled as Kevin explained the situation. "I remember thinking my career was over when I had to present that name to the Verdani," she said. "I never imagined it would become the first galactic law. But how do we address this without looking foolish?" Kevin asked. "This summit is meant to establish humanity's place in the galactic community." Elizabeth considered this for a moment. "Perhaps we should embrace it." The Verdani did, and it's worked wonderfully for them. Planety McPlanetface is now one of the most successful joint colonies in known space. Embrace being the butt of a cosmic joke? Not a joke, Kevin, a recognition of a unique human quality. Our ability to find humor in formal situations is actually seen as a valuable trait by many species. The Verdani ambassador told me they've been studying human humor as a way to improve their own social interactions. Kevin nodded slowly. "So you think we should just accept this law and move on?" "I think we should do more than accept it. I think we should champion it." The next morning, the Galactic Cooperative Summit began with great ceremony. The main conference hall was filled with beings of all shapes, sizes, and colors. Some floated in special atmosphere tanks, others towered over the human delegates, and a few existed primarily as patterns of light within crystalline structures. Kevin Monroe stood at the podium to deliver the opening address. After welcoming all the delegations and expressing hope for a productive summit, he smiled and addressed the elephant in the room. "I understand that many of your civilizations have already established what you call Galactic Law Number 1, he said. There was a ripple of movement through the crowd that the human delegates recognized as the alien equivalent of nervous chuckling. "As hosts of this historic summit," Kevin continued, "we humans would like to formally propose that this unofficial guideline be adopted as the first official law of our new galactic cooperation." Surprised murmurs spread through the hall. The delegates had expected resistance or embarrassment from the humans, not enthusiastic support. In the spirit of this law, Kevin said, I invite the Verdani Supreme Leader to present a special commemorative plaque that I believe they have prepared for this occasion. The Verdani Supreme Leader, a tall, elegant being with shimmering blue-gray skin, approached the podium. It carried an ornate metal plaque that gleamed under the lights. 10 years ago, the Supreme Leader said, its translator conveying its words. Clearly, we gave humans the honor of naming one of our worlds. What we received was not what we expected, but it taught us something valuable about our new friends from Earth. The Supreme Leader held up the plaque so all could see it. Engraved on its surface in multiple languages were the words, Galactic Law Number 1, never let a human name your planet, unless you want tourists. Laughter rippled through the hall, including from the human delegates. It was a moment of shared humor that bridged the vast biological and cultural differences between the assembled species, the Verdani. Supreme Leader turned to Kevin. Humans have taught us that sometimes the unexpected choice leads to the greatest joy. Planety McPlanetface has become a symbol of friendship between our peoples and a reminder that dignity and humor need not be opposing forces. Elizabeth Morgan, seated in the front row, felt tears in her eyes. What had once seemed like a diplomatic disaster had become a cornerstone of interspecies understanding. As the summit continued over the following days, the delegates formalized Galactic Law Number 1 with unanimous approval. More important laws would follow, covering trade, territory, and technology sharing. But none would be remembered as fondly as the first. Years later, when new species joined the galactic community, they would learn about humans first through this law. And throughout explored space, whenever a newly discovered world needed a name, someone would inevitably suggest Planety McPlanetface 2, before being quickly overruled by a smiling invocation of Galactic Law Number 1.